Good morning. Some may say that I have just betrayed my brand because I have just received this. This is the Nikon Coolpix 995. Snappiness did a video on the Coolpix 990. If I can remember, I'll put a video up there. And this is legitimately quite an interesting camera, even though it's made by the inferior brand. But yeah, it does this, and this, and this, and this. I think we should review the amazing specs on it. 4x optical zoom, 3.3 megapixels, quick review of image, and a battery charger, which is actually pretty nice. Now, you may have seen a... Oh, I didn't even notice this until literally just now. Cool Pie. What was I gonna say? I got distracted by the Cool Pie. Oh, right. You may have seen a short that I did comparing these two cameras, and I had a little bit of a teaser in that video, so let's hop over to my desktop. So upon seeing this short, you'll notice that the background, especially right there, is changing a little bit between these two cameras. That is because the Nikon camera actually has a CMY Bayer filter, as opposed to an RGB Bayer filter. So that is what that background signifies, because you'll see CMY plus green, and on the Canon it's RGB. I don't know what kind of CMY sensor is in that camera, because there's this, I don't know. It may or may not have green, and I don't know if yellow or whatever else is the background color, like which one there's two of. Regardless of this, however, I thought it would be cool to open up my old version of Photoshop again and show you how to do this with a CMY sensor and, you know, sort of do a recap. So I'm gonna do exactly what I did in my first video on this. I'm just gonna zoom in on the top corner. And now the colors I'm gonna select are gonna be cyan, magenta, and yellow instead of red, green, and blue. Now I'm gonna use the same photo that I used in my last video to make a slightly easier comparison between the two photos. So just like before, we'll put the Bayer filter on top. Now we'll change the blending mode. And we already have a pretty color accurate photo that just needs a little bit of adjustment. And there we go. Now this looks really nice. So in order to understand why the CMY sensor looks so much brighter than the RGB sensor did, we need to look at a black and white sensor. So if we zoom in on part of the image that is showing perfectly white, like this part right here, we'll see that the pixels are showing white, as you'd expect. And for the CMY sensor, when you zoom in there, those pixels are actually just showing full brightness of the cyan, magenta, yellow, and green. And that's how it shows a full brightness part of the image. And so with these RGB colors, it shows full brightness red, green, and blue pixels to signify full brightness. So the reason that the CMY sensor looks so much brighter is because the colors, cyan, magenta, and yellow, are brighter themselves, because they're the subtractive colors. So I've just set up this little demo here to show as an example how the cyan, magenta, and yellow colors are subtractive. So I have these set to darken, and you can see that when I put them over top of each other, they darken to make red, green, and blue. And these are the additive colors, red, green, and blue, and I have these ones set to lighten because they're the additive colors, and you can see that when I overlay these ones, they add together to make cyan, magenta, and yellow. Just by taking a look at this, you can see that they add together to make brighter colors than they were before, and when all three of them add together, they make white. And with the CMY, they do the opposite. They subtract to make darker colors than they are by themselves, and they subtract all together to make black. And so when you're subtracting, you want to start with a bright color so that you can work your way down to black. And when you're adding, you want to start with a dark color so that you can add your way up to white. That's why the CMY sensor is so much brighter, and why this RGB sensor is so much darker. And the big advantage of a CMY sensor is kind of displayed by this picture being so much brighter. Because if we look at a black and white sensor, the pixels themselves are perfectly white. They're perfectly bright, and they can become darker. And so the whites are perfect, and it has all the dynamic range that it can possibly exploit. But with the RGB sensor, the brightest thing that can be made is this red, green, and blue, which is not very bright. But with the CMY sensor, the colors are almost white in and of themselves, and so they can be very bright. And so what happens when you make a CMY sensor is that the luminance information is much better than with an RGB sensor. The problem, though, is that the color information is not as good. So you're essentially trading luminance accuracy for color accuracy. Anyway, enjoy some close-ups of the duck.